We're joined for the entire program by CHLOÉ Hilliard, and her book is F Your Diet and Other Things My Thighs Tell Me. Well, welcome, CHLOÉ, to the conversation.
Thank you. I just love hearing you say it, other things my thighs tell me.
It's a great title, and I only had a chance to leaf through it, but I've read, what I read is really both entertaining and really, well, it's offbeat in that your life, clearly, I'm talking about your early life.
Yes.
What did revolve around food, and also you were like immediately this kid who was really a big kid.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes, there's a lot of stuff coming together when your life began in childhood, I mean.
Yeah, a lot of things that shaped who I am today. So just to give people a little heads up, when you say I'm big, I'm 6'1", I've been this height since I was 12. I haven't grown a single inch since I was 12.
I mean, I'm chuckling because when you walk into a class in school and you're 6'1".
Yeah. They think I'm the teacher. No, sir, that was freshman year. I was so excited. I walked in, I wore like my best outfit, and they were like, shh, the teacher's here. And I started looking around like, where's the teacher? And they were like, ain't you the teacher? I was like, no, I'm your classmate.
And when you're a kid, all you want to do is fit in.
Absolutely, and it's really hard to do that when you are the biggest. So I was the tallest, the biggest, and the youngest. My birthday's at the end of the year. So I started kindergarten at 4. So emotionally, I was just already younger than everybody else. So that led to a lot of bullying and like just me being naive and gullible about a lot of things. And so I had a lot of things stacked up against me. And it's interesting, as a woman, almost 40, now I realize a lot of these things shaped how I live my life, how I interact. When you want to kind of fade into the background, you make yourself invisible, which is interesting, being like the biggest person in the room. And then how that just manifests when it comes to like personal relationships, professional relationships, and just how people and yourself see the world.
You know what? I want to get back to your childhood in a second, but you just said something that's really intriguing to me. Okay, so now, how has it manifested itself in your life?
Yeah, I think it's manifested itself in my life where it was a point when I really wanted to just fit in. And especially, I was a journalist for over 10 years. So that is all about just not being the story, not being the headline. You're just observing and being in the background. And then I just had a switch and I became a comedian, which thrusted me into the spotlight. And so being a comedian helped me come to terms with all the things that I thought were problematic. They actually make me unique. And so when I'm on stage, I'm talking about my point of view, my perspective, you realize, oh, you're not alone. And even with writing this book's been out a week and I've already gotten letters from people who are like, this is exactly like my childhood. And here I am thinking I'm a unicorn. And there's so many of us out here who've dealt with the same body image and height and weight issues.
You know, in a way, you're unicorn-ish because most people don't deal with it in the ways that you had to deal with it. But by the same token, when I saw the title of the book, you know, F Your Diet and Other Things My Thighs Tell Me, I thought, yeah, this is a book about the struggle that we all have, or yes. I shouldn't say we all to a person, but you know what I mean, that many people have with food and with the social part of food, and you touch on that in the book.
I do. I hope people realize that, yes, it is very comical and funny and lighthearted, tongue-in-cheek cover and imagery with the popcorn and the bra, but I also do have a lot of facts and figures. I actually enlisted a professional researcher to help me with this.
Well, you're a journalist as well.
Yes, but I also wanted somebody who can give me like the nuts and bolts of when it comes to the food industry and like statistics about like weight and obesity in America. And it was very important to me to have all those things because I want people to learn. I didn't want to just write a book as a comedian and it be funny and voyeuristic like a diary. I wanted people to have information they can take away and apply to their own life, because a lot of the things in here I wish I had known, because I probably would have approached dieting and the way I view my body much differently.
For example?
For example, the reason why the American child obesity rate has gone up is because of President Ronald Reagan. So when he was in office, he cut the school lunch budget by $1.46 billion. And that relaxed a lot of the restrictions on the quality control because now people can make more money. So instead of a burger being 80% beef, it's like 50% beef, and they put soy and tofu. And then you can literally see the obesity chart rise when it comes to kids because we're eating all of this nonsense in our school lunches.
So you're saying that it's filler that shows up in a lot of these?
Yes, absolutely, a lot of filler. And then also just restrictions when it comes to like who can afford to buy school lunch or not. You know, they increase the amount of school lunch, and then you have parents who can't afford that or sending their kids to school with nothing to eat. And so what are you gonna eat? You're gonna eat junk, or you're gonna eat nothing, and then you're gonna overeat when you go home. So it's just a cycle of like how we eat and how we deal with food in this country that we don't realize really impacts us as adults.
Yeah, I think you're right to point to the school lunches, in part anyway, because when you give these kids pizza and cheese and it's all this just fat stuff, and it just becomes, and then these huge sugary drinks.
Yes.
I mean, all those things add to it. You point to something else. As I say, I only had a chance to leaf through the book, but I got a little chunks here and there. And you point to something that I really have an issue with, and it's the way the urban communities, if I can use that term, have been plagued by no healthy food options.
Absolutely, yes.
They're surrounded by poison, if you will.
Yes, and that's considered a food swamp. So a food swamp is when a neighborhood or community is infiltrated by mass commercial food restaurant chains, or like the chicken shacks, all of these places that it's like a meal that's like 2 for something. Everything's a deal because it makes you feel like you're getting more bang for your buck. And so that's a food swamp. And most food swamps occur when there's a food desert. A food desert means that you have to travel, over a mile to get to a supermarket. And so when you don't have access to supermarket food, you get access to cheaper stuff because they would rather come and build all of these chain restaurants than to build a supermarket. And so you realize in a lot of Black and brown communities, and also I don't wanna just make it like Black and brown, but in America in general, middle America is filled with food swamps and food deserts.
Yeah, there's no shortage of heavy white people.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of strip malls with like all you can eat, buffets, and pick your ethnic takeout for the night. But when you think about it, it's like in Black and brown communities, the supermarkets don't come until white people come, until gentrification comes, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we need a Whole Foods, we need a Trader Joe's, we need a Fairway, we need a Wegmans. Like I live in Brooklyn, New York, and now we have every single top of the line supermarket, and we didn't have that when I was growing up. We had to carpool, get the people together, get a car, someone who could drive us to go to a supermarket. It's
astounding,
yeah.
And it's so starkly visible. Now you mention your growing up, I want to talk about it for a second because it really also has its own funkiness to it, right?
Yes.
You grew up sort of in a Hasidic neighborhood, right?
I did. I grew up in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And so when people hear Williamsburg, they think like, ooh, trendy Williamsburg. I was like, no. I was there before the coolness. Yeah, before the trust fund kids and the yogurt shops. I was there with the Hasidic Jewish neighbors with the curls and the top hats, everything. And so I actually thought I was Jewish for a while growing up. I did. I did, because it was the neighbors. That's who I got to play with, because my neighborhood was very, very small on non-Hasidic Jews. So there were maybe like 10 to 12 families to like 100 plus families of Hasidic Jewish people. So I played with my neighbors until, they became women at 12 and I didn't.
Right, well, no, that's the thing though. Those communities can be cloistered. So
yes.
The kids all play, but once they start to grow up,
yes.
Then they get into the insular neighborhood part of the Hasidic community.
Yeah. And that had an impact on me too, because I was essentially bused to like a smart Black school. So I lived in a Jewish neighborhood. I had to take 2 buses to go to a gifted and talented program. I had no cultural reference. I had no point of entry. And I was just in the middle of 2 different worlds that I felt like I did not belong.
In a way, I mean, you when you lay it out like that, it does sound like there are challenges, but in a way there were benefits. I mean, you benefited from a lot of this, even as it challenged you maybe as a kid, because
yes.
you're sort of like trying to find magnetic north,
Yes, I benefited it because my parents also made sure that I was well-rounded. So they explained to me like, this is a unique situation, take advantage of it and learn from everything. And I think that's allowed me to navigate multiple spaces throughout the country. I mean, traveling as a comedian, I can go up to anybody or stand on stage in front of anybody and kind of figure out how to relate to that person.
Tell me about the gifted school thing. So how did they identify you as someone who should go to a gifted school, and what does that mean, a gifted school?
So back in the day, you could take a test, and so most public schools in New York City had specialized programs within their mass population, and you would test into that and you would be in these small gifted classes. And so maybe there were like two classes per grade of students who were in the gifted classes. Now they don't do it like that, because people got offended that why would you keep the gifted kids from the regular, like not the regular, from the general population children, because they're saying that the kids who may not test as high could learn from the kids who are gifted. So it's more of a mixed inclusiveness thing now. Yes, I know. And so I did that from elementary school, and then I went to a specialized junior high school, and then I went to my high school. My high school was a business career, so I studied computer science. And as soon as I graduated, everything I learned was obsolete.
Well, you must have clearly, you made the decision at some point that, yeah, indeed, you weren't going to follow that course.
Yes, I always wanted to be a journalist, and me wanting to be a journalist is because I was bullied as a kid, is because I felt voiceless, and I wanted to give a voice to those who were kind of marginalized and pushed to the side. And thankfully, my physical stature, being a giant, allows me to defend people more so than someone else. So I could go into like a seedy neighborhood and talk to somebody, or sit on someone's couch and get the story, or talk to a victim. And I just became like, that was my way of being like an activist. It's like, I want to tell people stories.
You know, when you talk about being bullied, it seems at odds with someone who was as big as you were as a kid. You know, but I think, and this is a guess, and then I want you to tell me if I'm right, it's not just about physical stature, we're talking about bullying, it's about emotional bullying,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah.
Yes, I came from a very pure place. I was an only child at the time, and I grew up in a Hasidic Jewish neighborhood, and there was just that hazing that you have when you're a child amongst other children socially. I just didn't have those experiences. And so I went into school very like earnest, like, oh, it is what it is. Whatever you say it is, that's what it is. I just didn't have the nuance of like just the social structure. So I was definitely out there. I was very vulnerable.
I want to get to your career and then when you made the move into stand-up comedy in a second, but I want to go back to your childhood because I think it's important when it comes to this food thing, which is what the book's about.
Yes.
Food is social. Food is really the thing that brings us together. Hey, I got a great sushi place. Hey, I got a great vegan place. You got to check this place. You know, there's a sense of community around food, and you referenced that specifically growing up. That food at your grandmother's place and the family collected around both the making of food and the eating of food.
Yes.
Lots of it.
My grandmother is a quintessential Southern grandmother. She's a matriarch of the family. Every Sunday morning she would get up before church and like start the whole dinner, and then it would still be cooking by the time we came back from church. So she would set up like huge 6-foot tables just for desserts and pies. Like it was an event, and you would pick your corner where you were gonna nap after because you was gonna be sleepy. And so she always put so much value on food because growing up where she grew up on a sharecropper's farm, so food was community, was currency, and there were black and white families, she tells me, that lived on the farm where they sharecropped, and they would pool their food together. And so it was always a sign of love and affection and admiration to share food, to welcome someone to your table. And so when I was a kid growing up and she was cooking food, you had to eat everything on your plate, because you were gonna waste her food, which also translates to you're not gonna waste my love. This is love.
Right, it's insulting to leave it there.
Yes, and I understand what you're saying, but when you're a kid, you're forced to eat everything on your plate, what she didn't realize is that psychologically you're teaching me to overeat. And so now my appetite is much bigger than it should be for a 4 or 5-year-old because I'm forced to eat everything on my plate. And I think it also comes from a sense of scarcity of like not being able to have this, so let's not waste it. But what happens is then mentally the signals are, oh, I can eat more, I can fit more in my stomach, and then you start to overeat, and then you have someone tell you like maybe you shouldn't eat that much, and you're just like, well, this is all I know because I don't even know portion control. So it came from a very innocent, loving place, but it definitely set a tone in my young life.
So this is the book about blaming your grandmother,
yes.
Am I right? Yeah. Okay.
She has a copy too. She's been reading it.
No, but you actually are talking about something, and again, this is something that a lot of us can relate to, which is that in the family, we weren't taught portion control. Portion control, I've never even heard the term until, just 10 years ago or something.
I went to a nutritionist once and he told me that the proper protein size was like a deck of cards, and I laughed in his face.
Well, we're all out of whack. And obviously, also this country, we like it big. We like, hey, all you can eat. There's plenty more where that came from. Yes. 2 for 1, as you say. So in a sense, we rewarded the big gulp. I mean, everything about this country when it comes to food, it would seem, is associated with bigger and more.
Yes, and it's not necessarily healthy. Of course it's not healthy. If we realized just how unhealthy those things were, if we really connected people's ailments as they grow older, high cholesterol and heart heart problems and all these other things, if you connected it directly to food, we would be way more enraged and we would demand way more quality control on our food. But we don't, because we tend to think that those things are genetic, and they're not genetic. They are the trends of your family. Eating this way has led to everybody in your family getting the same ailments, and you consider that to be genetic.
And I mean, all of a sudden everybody's got diabetes. I mean, come on, it's really a stretch. But you also did all the dieting that we see or have experienced firsthand. I'm talking about the fad dieting.
Absolutely. My first diet, I was in elementary school and my mom sent me to school with Slim Fast.
I mean, think about that as an elementary school kid.
Yes.
So she was aware already that there was an issue potentially here.
And what she thought was right was to send me to school with Slim Fast. Thankfully, she covered it with aluminum foil, so it wasn't like I snuck it. But I didn't even realize what it was at first. She was like, "Oh, here's a milkshake. Just drink this for lunch." And I was like, "Oh, milkshake!" and then the other kids were like, "Well, how'd she get it in a metal can?" I was like, And then I like peeled it back, and I was on Slim Fast. And I think that lasted maybe like 2 weeks, just because the ridicule. It was just too much in school to go through all of that. But she was just trying, because nobody had the conversations about like how to put your kid on a diet, and that's not even the language we should have. It should be, how does the whole family come together to eat more wholesome, healthy food and understand portion control, instead of just saying the one kid has to eat less. And so already that's another stigma that you deal with. And so I was always aware of like what I ate and how much I ate. And then I would still comfort myself because I was an only child. So when my parents weren't home, I would still like eat, whatever little thing I could find in the house to like soothe me, because I was bullied all day at school. And so it's like a non-stop cycle.
That's the other thing about food. I mean, it's not just the social, it's comforting. It becomes a sort of self-medicating element, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah. I want to ask you now about, so you went into journalism, you went into writing, and you did it for a good chunk of time.
I did, yeah, over 10 years. I was a staff writer at the Village Voice. I was an editor at the Source magazine and Vibe magazine, and I freelanced for countless other publications.
I mean, that's a really cool resume. And then you pivoted to stand-up comedy. So why did you pivot, and how did that happen?
So I think stand-up comedy found me. You ever looked at your life and realized that it was showing you signs of what it really wanted you to do?
Every day, my friends,
As you wear the hat, like every day. So I think I never really thought about stand-up comedy, but it made sense. And I kind of got into it because I wanted to further my journalism career. I had done print, I had done online, I had yet to do television, and I really wanted to have a presence in front of the camera. I wanted to be funny, quick on my feet, interview people. And so I took a stand-up comedy class. And at the end of the class, you had a graduation show. And at the end of the graduation show, all of my friends were like, "So when is your next show?" And I was like, I didn't even think about another show. I just wanted to get past this little hump. And then I got bit by the bug, and it's been 10 years.
Now, when you do the recital or whatever, like the equivalent of a piano recital or whatever, but it's in comedy, you're doing your thing at the end of the class. How long are you on stage? 5 minutes?
5 minutes. The 5 longest minutes of my life. I was absolutely terrified. And I have always spoken in front of people. I was always a narrator in the church play. I did drama, so I'm not afraid to be in front of people. But the comedy part, it felt so foreign to me. I was so nervous. I couldn't even take the mic out of the mic stand. I had my jokes written on the side of my hand. So they videotaped it. No one would ever see that it's in the vault. But after every punchline, I would look down at my joke and be like, okay, I'm ready for the next joke.
And was your stuff autobiographical initially? I assume now it is, right?
Yes, it is now, but initially, no, it wasn't. I think that's the hardest thing. That most young comics tend to deflect from who they are, because they don't know how to make themselves funny. They don't know how to make their lives funny, because it takes a certain amount of vulnerability. So you kind of do like abstract things about like the weather, or like I made fun of my name. I would talk about like, growing up in New York, but it was never super personal. But now, 10 years later, it's very personal. I just actually released a stand-up comedy, my first stand-up comedy album.
Oh, wow.
It's called Big D Energy.
Big D Energy.
Yes.
And you can get that, you have a website?
All the streaming platforms.
All the streaming platforms. I want to ask you before we finish up about sort of this thing that you're talking about. You just talked about the album, and you recorded the book on, I don't know if they say book on tape anymore, but you know what I mean. The audio book. Thank you, the audio book. So what is that like?
It is interesting. So when you're writing a project of this magnitude, it took me close to a year to write it from beginning to end with edits and stuff. And it's just you and your computer and your space in your room with the music, and you're just in the zone. And then
you write that every day? Is that how you do it?
I procrastinated. I'm not gonna lie, I procrastinated, and I'm a night person, so I was writing probably like 7 p.m. to like 3 a.m. I did that for like a good 2 months solid just to get the first draft out. But once you finish and you send your edits to your editor and you get it back, and then you're like, okay, this is finally a book, it's done. And then they're like, oh, do you want to read it? And then you're like, oh, okay. And now you sit in a booth and you have people who are going over it with you line by line, and you realize how weird it is to read this out loud to someone you don't know. Especially when you like say a word incorrectly. You're like, I shouldn't have wrote this word down. I don't know how to say it.
Wow, that's funny. What word did you say incorrectly?
It was so many. No, it wasn't that many. It was a couple. But also like when you're doing like.
Did you write this book or not?
No, but when you're doing like the research and you're doing like medical journals and stuff like
that.
I
see,
stuff
I
like
see.
That.
Yeah. Jargon type stuff.
Yeah, jargon type stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm very excited for people to read it and digest it. It's more than just food. I deal with feminism and culture and social and economics, a lot of things that shape how we eat in this country. I think a lot of us need to pay attention to that instead of just like fat shaming someone because they might not have the education or access to the types of food that benefit them.
I also think, honestly, that women just have it so much harder than men. I think women, it's brutal. I'm disgusted by the way it's cultural. I understand it's like baked into the culture. So please, but I just feel as though women just have it tougher than guys. We're forgiving of guys carrying around extra weight or whatever, but women somehow it's not cool, I think
it's starting to change. I want to applaud social media for that. It allows the everyday woman to put themselves out there because we don't see ourselves. And it's weird if you look at television and film, the average woman is not what the average woman looks like. The average American woman is actually a size 16, like almost 18. So we need to see more of that, and that shouldn't be an exception, it should be the norm.
But that's also the thing that we see in movies and in advertisements, and you look at a Dior ad or whatever the product is, you see these perfect people, men and women, you know what I mean? And it becomes an ideal. I guess it's good to have goals, but if it's not a realizable goal, I think it's corrosive, right?
Yes, and I think that's what my whole objective is with this book. People ask me, why did I write it? I really wrote it for myself. I wrote it for myself because I got tired of subscribing to this idea of what perfection is and putting myself through, spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on diets and gurus and trips and weight loss pills. And I felt like I need to live my life and I need to be healthy. And I don't want anybody to misconstrue that when I say F your diet, I'm not saying be unhealthy. I'm saying figure out what works best for your body. I personally eat for my blood type, which changed my life because a lot of things that I thought were healthy actually were not good for me. And I actually would have reactions to that I didn't pay attention because we don't really listen to our bodies on a daily basis. And I want people to just be healthy, but I also want people to know that you can be healthy and not have a six-pack. So.
Right.
Just embrace it.
I know that is something that you say, and it's worth hearing. So the book is F Your Diet. Here it is. F Your Diet and Other Things My Thighs Tell Me. Yes. By CHLOÉ Hilliard. Get it wherever you get books. And what a pleasure to meet you. I know the stand-up thing has been so successful for you, Tonight Show and all this other stuff and attention. And it's really cool that you took time out of your career in a way to do this, to focus on this one thing.
I appreciate it. And if anyone wants to see me on the road, you can go to yourdiet.com to see where I'm going to be.
FYourDiet.com. All right, thanks, CHLOÉ Hilliard.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And until next time, bye-bye.
On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.